Daphne Barak.
Come be a part of Doc Holliday's Rock-Splitting Politics with your host, Dr. Ed Holliday. Hear the voices of liberty speaking all across America. Doc Holliday provides thought-provoking interviews and commentary about the issues and actions that are afflicting this country and what we need to do to get America back on track. Get fired up, get inspired, get on board with Doc Holliday's Rock-Splitting Politics right now.
And here we go.
Hey, once again, that is the sound of rock cracking. You've got Doc Holliday's Rock-Splitting Politics right here on webtalkradio.net. I'm your host, Dr. Ed Holliday, and we have an exciting show. We're going to jump right into it because we got an author who wrote a book, and the name of the book is To Plea or Not to Plea, the story of Rick Gates and the Mueller investigation. It's by Daphne Barak, and she is an exciting storyteller. She's had some great success stories like Saving Amy, talking about Amy Winehouse. She's also done documentaries, television shows, just a remarkable woman, and you can check out her website, and we got a link to her book at Amazon right here and now. Let's get her onto the phone. And of all the subjects and all the topics we could talk about, I'd rather talk to no one other than Daphne, because of what's going on with impeachment of President Trump and what's going on with the Ukraine, what people know, what they don't know. And I think Rick Gates is someone who's shed a lot of light, and nobody's talking about it. But Daphne is. She's got a book about it. So, Daphne, tell us exactly why you wrote this book.
First of all, it's my fifth book, and it's a very good question. And I usually interview, as you know, of course you've heard about my first book, Saving Amy, with Amy Winehouse, which the film inspired by it, won an Oscar, and usually my big interviews with, by the way, my sometime partner, Liz Murdoch, the daughter of the owner of Fox and Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, and Michael Jackson, Liza Minnelli, Eric Clapton, of course, head of state. So it's not my usual book. Why did I write it? Very good question. Because, as you said, Rick Gates has been never seeks publicity. He's been a very important guy, but always in the shadow. He was a guy, when Eric Trump introduced him to me and my husband, Bill Nasty, he actually asked us to be delegates. You remember that at the time, although Donald Trump nailed enough delegates to be the Republican nominee, Ted Cruz didn't like it, right? So he was trying to steal delegates for free lunch or dinner. So what the Trumps did, they asked close friends of them, like Bill and myself, to be delegates. And he just sent me an email, Daphne, I want you to meet Rick Gates. He's in charge of the delegates. Wow. And Rick, I want you to meet Daphne. She's been a close friend of the Trump family for years, very special friend. And that's it. So that we didn't become friends. That's the time that Paul Manafort, as you remember, became the campaign manager of Trump. And Rick Gates was his number two. We talked several times on the phone. When we learned to know him was really when, one of the Trump family asked me to go and sample their new hotel, now very famous hotel, the Trump DC, the Trump International in Washington, D.C. It was on January 1st, on the new year, just, 20 days before the inauguration. Right. And it was sort of like a rehearsal, like a rehearsal dinner before the big wedding. I mean, the General Mikhail was trying the balloons, trying, if the menu was right. And it was I took my brother and my husband, Ryan Priebus was there. And of course, we were treated as VIP. Suddenly I hear somebody screaming, Daphne, Daphne. And I find a couple of the people from the campaign who knew me, of course, and suddenly somebody is sitting there with a computer writing a speech and say 2 a.m. in the morning, and he say, hey, we talked so many times on the phone, my name is Rick Gates. So that was your first time to actually meet Rick just before the inauguration? And he was the most important guy to know if you weren't somebody like me who was a friend of Donald Trump, because we were staying with a family and friends at their hotel. We were invited everywhere, but usually if you really needed an invitation to the inauguration event, one of the candlelight dinner with then-elect President Donald Trump and Vice President-elect Mike Pence, Marie Gates was a guy. He was a deputy of a mutual friend of Trump and myself, billionaire Tom Barak, who was the chairman of the inauguration. And even, people who wanted a job in the government, they would say, Rick, would you give it to the transition team? And he was doing it happily. He was very likable.
Daphne, I want to stop you right there just because I know listeners have been listening over the years. They know I was there also at the Republican National Convention as a delegate from Mississippi. And,
great.
And I was there at the inauguration. So all my listeners know I didn't get to rub shoulders with people you were. So I'm glad you're giving us the inside. I gave them the inside of what I saw, but I didn't get to rub the shoulders with everybody like you're talking about. So please continue your story. I just want our listeners to understand that.
You did your part.
I was there. I stood in rain and cold for 5 hours to hear that speech at the inauguration. So that's why I wanted you to tell your story, because my listeners are getting a better insight from what I told them. So please go ahead.
And the book is very different from what people say. I mean, I told the president, I was writing it, and Bill is coming with his own foreign policy book in January, Trump, Erdogan, and Game Changers. So they knew about both. Melania and Donald talked about it. And the book is very different. There are very funny, juicy stories. There are also romantic stories inside the real relationship with Donald Trump and Melania. There's a cruel story about how Ted Cruz betrayed Trump, and there was an agreement nobody knew about. And, betrayed it like a Trojan horse, really the last second. And you were in the convention. You remember that, right?
I remember that. I was there at the convention and on the night that Ted Cruz spoke, and I know a lot of folks, at the convention booed Ted Cruz, didn't like him. The night after he spoke, I saw Ted Cruz's father, who's a pastor, and a lot of people were booing him. And I said, well, no, come on. I grabbed some delegates from the Hawaii delegation, and we got together and we prayed over Ted Cruz's father just to show that, hey, we need some unity here. We got to win an election.
Exactly.
And so,
exactly. I'm with you.
So that's my little input there, but I love what you're telling us, so please continue on, Daphne.
Yeah, exactly. So basically what you and I didn't know, and I'm very close to the family, I didn't know until I wrote this book, and it's also a CBS News exclusive, as you know, so it's also television. I didn't know that there was an agreement between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, Jared Kushner, and Ted's wife, Holliday, were in the know, where they agreed about exactly. And the last second, he just he ensured himself he would have a prime time, as you remember, on television. The best evening, the key evening, where the nominees basically saying, thank you for nominating me, and boom, he just broke the agreement. And there's also a very juicy story about what's the real personal reason for the hatred between Mitt Romney and Donald Trump. There is a very, very funny story how Mike Pence almost didn't get the nomination because when he was auditioning to be the running mate, and he wasn't the leading one. You remember there was Newt Gingrich, there was Chris Christie. So when he was auditioning in Bedminster, that we just saw Trump there a few weeks ago for a private dinner, you know what Trump loves more than anything? Two things, golf and junk food. I'm not talking about Melania. Of course, he loves Melania. But besides Melania, he loves two things, golf and junk food. And apparently he said to Rick Gates, oh, my God, Pence is the most horrible golf player ever. Oh. And then to top it, he was very gracious. Trump knows how to be gracious and charming when he wants to. And he was ordering food to Pence and the other, players. And you know what it is, hot dogs, cheeseburger, fries.
Well, I've heard that's what President Trump likes and does, but I'm glad you're confirming that.
Absolutely. And Pence stood there, look how gracious Trump was. Yeah. Stood there and said, oh, no, I cannot eat that. my wife would never doesn't want me to eat such unhealthy food. I wanted chicken salad, and you can imagine Trump's face, right?
Yeah. So that almost cost him the vice presidency, huh?
Very, 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 yeah, exactly.
Oh.
There's a very juicy stories nobody knows, and also the beautiful relationship that my husband and I witnessed the last several months. Although I know Donald since I was 20, since Rupert Murdoch brought me to America to be the interview of Fox 5, but we became much closer to him and to Melania, actually, during the last several months when I was writing the book, and I did tell him. And people don't understand. She's not a beautiful wallflower. She's a beautiful woman.
Right.
But she is a 50-50 partner with him. We are talking, he really, he loves Ivanka, they're all friends of mine, but he really loves her more than anything. He's very proud of her. He trusts only her 100%. And we have been witnessing private conversation that he was whispering to my ear, and I was whispering because he didn't want people to read my lips in the last several months, and he really trusts only her. And we're talking about two levels of trust. One, that he knows that she will never backstab him, and after all these Omarosa and Cliff Sims taping him behind his back, people are writing books against him.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you cannot blame the poor guy. But secondly, I have to share with you and your listeners that he also respects her judgment about people. That's very important. And CBS, who kicked off my book 4 weeks ago, did reveal that the book revealed that Melania was the one who picked Mike Pence for the president, because she felt, although she liked Newt Gingrich, he was the leading candidate of Jared and Ivanka, and for good reasons. I love Newt as well, but she felt that because Newt Gingrich and Chris Christie were presidential candidates themselves, they would patronize their husband, or they would already think about their next run. She said Mike Pence would be, quote unquote, loyal to the presidency. And he listened to her. The book says, baby, what do you think? What do you think? And Bill and I witnessed it ourselves, so in our private conversation. So it's a very different book of what you think. Yeah. But I know you want to talk about the impeachment, right?
Well, I do, but when you just said that, I want to say that really confirms Melania, and because I think Mike Pence has been a super vice president that's really held together the Trump coalition. I know, like, the evangelicals is such a big part of what put Trump in the office, and I believe that, I don't know if they really trusted Trump, but they trusted Mike Pence. That has endeared them.
Very valid argument. I agree with you.
And so I think Melania, and after you said that story, it makes me appreciate Melania even more. That might very well be the reason that he has Mike Pence as his vice president.
Absolutely. And Bill and I have witnessed private conversation that he asked her, what do you think? And she tells him. I mean, my husband's upcoming book, which I would love you to interview him. It's it's the same publisher in UK and Australia, and it's a different publisher in US. Mine is a Shet. This is a Postil. Is actually about, as I said, Erdogan, Turkey, Syria, and very, very time-wise. And he's the only one who speaks with both Turkish President Erdogan and Trump privately because of my relationship. And he's the one who gave the advice to Trump to really talk to Erdogan directly. Mike Pompeo and his wife Susan hosted us at home, and Mike said, "Oh, it was you. Now I know what's going on." But why am I telling you? Because even about such a serious, crucial issue.
Yes.
When my husband told the president, you should do so and so. Before he went, you remember, to the G20 in Argentina, and then he really talked to Erdogan directly and decided to pull out of Syria later on.
Huge decision,
Melania interfered, but, I mean, she was welcome to interfere by her husband, and she said, that's right, I mean, I'm not going to quote exactly what she said because it was a private conversation, but the essence of it was that I told you to deal with this leader directly, not through a go-between or ambassadors or State Department and so on. So basically, even in such a very, very crucial issue, she weighed in and he listened.
Well, see, that you're giving a side of Melania that just is so important because I know the press just tears her up. I mean, she's a beautiful first lady, and everything I've heard is that she's smart. And I mean, that's what you're verifying, and maybe one of the most important first ladies we've ever had, and I'm sure she is, because of the way Trump is moving around in the world and draining the swamp.
Difficult for her. People don't get it. I mean, there is a person which I mentioned in my book, and you would know who it is. I just don't want to. I don't like to badmouth, but basically there is a person that you considered a friend, a girlfriend, and somehow, they were so betrayed by the Omarosos of the world that, this person collaborated with Michael Cohen, who betrayed them as well.
Wow.
And she was Melania's friend, and for some reason I mentioned her. I said, one of the chapters of the book is inside the investigation, the Mueller investigation. It's the first inside the Mueller investigation. That's why it's so big. And I said, I remarked something, about your ex-friend, and she corrected me. She touched my hand, and she's so demure. She's so beautiful. She's so well-mannered, but you could see how hurt she is. And she said, "No, Daphne, my ex-friend," and you could see the pain.
Mm-hmm.
You could see the pain. So the hatred against her husband is basically catching people hate her with no reason, and they're both, by the way. The gossip about the relationship is really silly. They've never been more united. They with us, they laugh, they talk. And you could see how united because they really love each other and respect each other, but also because of all these betrayals, the books against them, the tape. They're just united also by loneliness. Can you imagine?
Oh, I'm glad you're pointing this out for our listeners, because, I mean, she just takes just horrible way the press is treating her, and people talking behind her back and saying it's not a real marriage and all this stuff that's just baloney. And I'm glad you're here to let our listeners know what's really going on. Mm-hmm. You're right. We got so much in that book, but I did want to get to the Rick Gates and very good. And by the way, he's sentencing. I was doing a book signing yesterday in San Diego when I flew back from Mar-a-Lago. By the way, I have to brag. I'll text message you afterwards. Okay.
We saw Trump, of course, 3 days in a row, and on the last day, my husband had hats with not with MAGA, not with Make America Great Again, but with Trump Game Changer, which is actually the name of his book. A friend of ours did the logo for us because of my husband's book. And Trump came and signed each one of them. Could you imagine?
Oh, wow. Well, my listeners, I'll tell you one.
But I really wanted to tell you. So I was doing this book signing yesterday in San Diego, and we flew from Mar-a-Lago, and I said,
Daphne, let me break in right now. I do want to hear what happened right after the book signing, and we're going to let you tell us in just a minute. But let me remind our listeners, you listen to Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics right here on webtalkradio.net. That's webtalkradio.net. We're glad to have everyone here, our listeners. Tell your friends and neighbors and get a link to this show, because Daphne is telling us some fantastic information, and this is where you won't get this information anywhere else but right here on Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. We're talking about Daphne's book. We do have a link to it if you go to our front page of this radio broadcast, and also on the front page you'll see a picture of a book called Bedrock Truths, and that's the book that Doc Holliday wrote along with Dr. Alveda King and Dr. Alex McFarland. If you don't have that book, Bedrock Truths, you can click on the picture of that. It'll take you to my website, and you can order that book. We'd love to get it out to you. We also have a book about Israel. I got a chapter in that book that you can also order. So hey, it's Christmas season, time to get some gifts out, so we'd be glad to get those out to you if you go to our website. And now we're going to let Daphne tell us about what happened after she had the book signing out in San Diego.
The sentencing of Rick Gates would be in December 17th. We are today in December 4th, right? And Mike Flynn is expected to have a sentencing at December 18th. Do you remember when they were indicted more than 2 years ago? They've been begging, both of them, to get sentencing, whatever it takes. Let's go back to our life. Let's,
get it done.
I mean, the way the Mueller team treated these people, it was so cruel. I mean, really like mafia tactics. I mean, Rick Gates, look, none of them is saint. Paul Manafort did a bad thing, Rick Gates did a bad thing, Mike Flynn did a bad thing, but I mean, what Manafort and Gates were charged to begin with had nothing to do with Donald Trump. It has to do with their activity. They were working to the former president of Ukraine. This was be elected. He was ousted in 2014.
I'm going to say this happened years before.
With Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I guess one of the questions in this story of Rick Gates, I mean, everybody wants to know, I mean, how did that information about Gates and Manafort working in the Ukraine, how did that information get out of Ukraine after all these years? Was it the Clinton campaign that helped maneuver that information to come out? I mean, I know what they pled guilty, and I know they're guilty to that, but I mean, it has nothing to do with Donald Trump, like he said.
Well, the FBI actually started to investigate the whole thing with Manafort earlier on, and they didn't feel they wanted to waste the time and money and the energy, so they left it alone. Okay. In April, suddenly, Paul Manafort is being appointed to be in charge of the delegate of Donald Trump, the leading candidate at that point, and then when they fire Corey Ludwensky, he's becoming the campaign manager. Boom! The biggest priority of the FBI is suddenly Paul Manafort and Rick Gates and what they did in Ukraine. 2-3 years of actually, when they were there, that's when Hunter Biden was there. That was on the watch of Obama. They were there 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14. So suddenly it's the most important thing. Also, what Flynn, if you remember, the judge was screaming at him and was and refused to go on with his sentencing a year ago on December 18th. It was his relationship with a Turkish millionaire, with a friend of the Turkish president. What does Trump have to do with that?
And see that, it makes you want to know why did the FBI, I mean, it looks like it's pure politics. I know when I was at the Republican convention for my show, I got you on my show, I had General Flynn, interviewed General Flynn for my show, and, just seemed rock solid American, and then all these charges against him, and you just think they had the Obama administration who had fired General Flynn. It's just like it's almost, if I would believe it if somebody said the CIA and everybody set him up to do these things just so they could have something against him. I don't know. It's just, that's what I know of your book.
I wanted to tell you something that Steve Bannon, I know I told Trump that I'm getting a text from Steve Bannon. I know they fell out, and I cannot blame Trump because Bannon really did shot himself in the foot with this, with collaborating with this crazy gossip book, Fire and Fury, and I don't understand it. But on the other hand, he's brilliant about other things, and 20%, 30% of what he's saying is brilliant. So
I agree.
So he text messaged me something that you love.
Okay.
You remember there was a trial of Roger Stone, right? And,
Roger Stone.
Remember, Roger Stone, is almost 70 years old. You remember how many, 20 FBI agents raiding his home in Florida early in the morning, as if we are talking about a cartel boss? I mean, that was crazy. And so the CNN crew just happens to be there at 5:30 in the morning. I mean, you beat me, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't understand. From $35 million that we spend, you and I, and on your listener, we are the taxpayers.
You're right. On the Mueller Report.
Mueller, and his people, which was more like a Weissman team, not a Robert Mueller. We have to get to there. Basically, why are we spending all this money to go after Roger Stone? So he said he talked to WikiLeaks. You and I know he's colorful. He probably lied. He didn't. He just needed attention from Donald Trump because he was fired and he felt upset. He said, I know something that I can save your campaign. All right. So Bannon and Rick Gates were forced to be the key witnesses against him. Now, Rick did not want to do that. Rick had to do, by the way, one thing I have to tell your listeners, and I got a lot of responses yesterday in the book signing. To plea or not to plea, when I went into the book, I said, it's probably, it can happen to each one of us. You're suddenly in the middle of the biggest investigation. The government wants your head because they want you to plea against somebody bigger. And I thought probably it's the worst, one of the worst two choices. It's like between AIDS and to choose between AIDS and cancer, right? You don't want either.
Right.
But no, what I found out when I started to work with Rick is No, if you are the one that the government is going after, you have no choice. Nothing. I mean, the moment Rick Gates decided to fight, and he said from day one, no Russian collusion, right? And he didn't change it. He did not flip against Trump. At all time, he said no Russian collusion. He almost lost his plea deal because of that. But the moment he decided to fight, and that would be the natural thing for you and I and your listeners.
We all would want to fight.
They doubled the charges. You remember, suddenly. He ran out of money. He never made the millions of Paul Manafort. Unlike Paul Manafort, he's much younger. He has 4 kids. 3 are so young they don't know something is wrong with daddy. As they managed to shelter them. He just didn't have money. The moment he broke down when they doubled the charges after 117 days or 118 days that he was really conflicted, and then, he had to surrender. So that's to plea or not to plea. So Bannon come with but he was just told this deal is this deal from the devil, because you're told one thing, it never happened. And top attorneys who have dealt with other cases, famous cases, told me the same after I started the book. Basically, he was just told that he will have to testify very cruelly against Paul Manafort, because they wanted probably Paul Manafort to flip against Trump. And the idea was it was supposed to be very cruelly. It's like 2 gladiators in ancient Rome. Whoever killed the other survived. And they didn't even... they refused to take the electrical bracelet from him until he delivered this cruel testimony. I mean, he had to be with the electrical bracelet. It was all conditioned. Then he didn't want to testify anymore, right? So, they imposed another trial, and then, of course, the big prize after Manafort, Roger Stone, and he refused, and they refused to sentence him before he testified. It was a deal, talking about quid pro quo.
So that's why Rick Gates has not been sentenced until all these other,
exactly.
Stone
and he had to deliver. So I asked Bannon, when I saw he's a key witness, I knew he was a key witness behind him, said, well, unlike Rick, you're not under a plea deal. Why did you go and testify? Bannon is texting me back. He says, Daph, what are you talking about? I mean, you can fight subpoenas so much, but that's it. Afterwards, you have to go. And there were text messages and emails from Roger Stone to me. I had to tell the truth, right? Otherwise, I will go to jail. Got it. Then he says, but you understand what's going with Rick Gates, right? And he knew that I was about to come out with the book.
Okay.
Because it was already promoted. And he said, it was, and I believe it. I said to Trump this weekend that as much as it came to Bannon, it makes a lot of sense, right?
Okay.
He said the whole deal was really to make sure that Trump purges himself. So don't forget, when Rick Gates and Mike Flynn and all of them were being investigated, they were not allowed to talk to anybody. So they didn't know what the others said, and Trump was thinking they were flipping against him. They were making them believe that Trump hates them because they feel that they betrayed him. Nothing was true, because nobody is allowed to talk to nobody, because otherwise it's obstruction of justice, right? Or tampering with witnesses.
But what you're saying is, let me make sure my listeners understood that. You're saying the whole deal, they wanted Gates, wanted everybody to feel like Trump. They hated them because they were trying to get Trump in a perjury trap.
Exactly. Like Clinton and Monica, right? Bill Clinton and Monica. Perjury is an easy thing. So when they asked Gates about the conversation with Roger Stone, that Roger Stone called Donald Trump while they were on the way to LaGuardia Airport in New York, okay. Rick was with him. They knew that. They had Roger Stone logs. Don't forget, AT&T and Verizon, everybody has to give your telephone logs, as you saw a few days ago with Adam Schiff, right? And they had everybody's logs. They knew that Roger Stone called Donald Trump when he was on his way to the airport. They knew how long they talked, and of course, they assumed that he only talked about WikiLeaks because they knew that that's the only way you could get Donald Trump attention. It was known in the campaign, right? So they knew Rick Gates was in the car. They already told Rick, hey, we know that he talked to Roger Stone about WikiLeaks, and we know that Roger Stone was telling everybody, because there were text messages and emails from Roger Stone, who is a bit unpredictable. Oh, I know what's coming, but more coming. So they knew that. So they wanted Rick Gates, who said that, under pressure in the Mueller Report. In the Mueller Report publishes it, but nobody read the Mueller Report because it's the worst
it's a slow read.
It's so boring, right? So they wanted it to say it in court under oath. So for that reason, the whole show. Now, why? Because by the time they knew what Rick Gates is saying, and Manafort said the similar thing, but Rick Gates was with Trump, right?
Uh-huh.
By the time they knew what he said, they already had something that you and I and Rick Gates and Bannon and anybody else, we did not know what they had. They had the written answers from Donald Trump to the written questions of Robert Mueller or Mo Weissman, right? No, they asked,
right.
Did you discuss with Roger Stone or with any of your team discuss with Roger Stone the WikiLeaks stolen emails, right? Donald Trump said, to my recollection, I did not talk to Roger Stone, and I don't recall that any of my team did, right?
Okay.
Great. They had this answer. So then they wanted Rick Gates in court, under oath, and they knew it would make headlines because, the key witness, it's a court, all the journalists was there, very public trial, especially with somebody which loves publicity like Roger Stone. They wanted Rick Gates to say, yes, he got the call from Roger Stone, and yes, Roger Stone, it's true, he did talk to him about WikiLeaks, and when he finished the conversation, he said, Roger said that we are going to get another bunch from WikiLeaks, which is good for us. Now, that's the whole perjury that Bannon suggests, that the whole Roger Stone big trial and the 20 agent and the whole thing about lying to Congress and all that was really to tap. And now you'll see what happened. They will try to add an article to the impeachment perjury because of that. So Rick Gates was used. Basically, they knew already the whole information, and he's under a plea deal. If he wouldn't testify, he would never be sentenced. You saw what happened to Mike Flynn. He came to a sentencing a year ago, and the judge threw the book at him and said, you have to collaborate in another trial or two before I would be willing to consider it. And now, because he didn't collaborate in one of the trials they are considering to make him a hostile witness. He may go to jail. You understand that? So
right.
It's a very, 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 the only thing that you and I can just waive it is think, I've been seeing Trump right now since this, Mueller investigation and afterwards impeachment every few weekends. And sometimes you remember things that I'm surprised, like, oh my God, how could this, everything which is going. And sometimes, like this weekend with all the pressure, I had to remind him that the woman that I'm telling her that I want to matchmake a friend of ours to a famous actor, what do you mean? We talked about it yesterday, right? I was in Palm Beach in the front pages because I'm bringing my friend Roseanne Barr to a victory party of Trump. Last year I brought John Voight.
Okay.
And it's front pages. They showed it to him a day before. He was so happy. He talked to me about Roseanne and John. I had to remind him the next day with all the pressure. He's going to a NATO meeting in London. That's the impeachment. He has 50 things. So if he said, I don't recall any conversation with Roger Stone about WikiLeaks, he probably doesn't recall it. How can he? He was campaigning sometime in 3-4 states in one day.
Yeah, but they're saying that Rick Gates was in the car in the vehicle with President candidate Trump at that point when Roger Stone called. That's what that's what they say. That was the big thing. Now it's also mentioned in the. Oh, Daphne, I got to stop you right there, and we have got to just finish this program up next week. So now you got to listen to Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics next week to hear what Daphne had to say and to follow up. She has some great things to say and following up, and so we will see you next week. And tell your friends and neighbors about Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. If you enjoyed this radio interview with Daphne Barak, then by all means send out this link, and we'll continue to grow our audience across America and even around the world. Like I said, we got friends in New Zealand now. We got friends in other countries that are listening to us. So keep listening to Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for joining us today, and remember to listen again next week for another edition of Doc Holliday's Rock Splitting Politics. You can order Ed's new book, Bedrock Truths, by clicking on the book cover right in front of you on the screen, or visit DocHolliday.org. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.